Do you know that beautiful, intelligent, successful girl that everyone admires, but who inexplicably gets involved with completely wrong guys? Or that brilliant woman who sabotages every promising relationship that comes her way? Well, there's a reason for that, which society prefers to sweep under the rug. And no, it has nothing to do with female drama, fussiness, or lack of character. It has to do with a wound so deep that it has shaped the way she sees the world, men, and especially herself. We're talking about paternal absence. And get ready, because what you're about to discover will completely change the way you see human relationships. The inconvenient truth is this: a girl who grows up without the emotional presence of her father is not just losing someone who lives in the same house. She is losing the first man who should have taught her her own worth. And when that learning doesn't happen, the void that remains is filled with such subtle and complex behavioral patterns that most people spend their entire lives without understanding why they act in a certain way. This is not her fault. It's not weakness. And it's definitely not destiny. But it's a reality that needs to be said without romanticizing it. When we talk about paternal absence, we're not just talking about the father who literally left, who abandoned the family, or who was never physically present. No, it's much broader and more painful than that. We're also talking about the father who lives in the same house but is emotionally absent. The one who works all day, comes home tired, turns on the television, and barely looks his daughter in the eye. The one who never asked how her day at school was, who never hugged her, who never said, "I love you," or "you are special." The one who was there in body, but was never truly present. And then begins a whole cascade of psychological consequences that shape this girl's personality from a very young age. Because the father, people, is not just another adult in the house. He is the first male role model a girl has in her life. It is through his eyes that she begins to understand how men see women, how effective relationships work, and, above all, what her own value is as a person. When this mirror is broken or simply does not exist, the girl grows up looking at nothing and trying to see herself. And that, my friend, hurts in a way that words can hardly describe. What happens in the psyche of this child is something that scholars call the formation of insecure attachment. Dr. Gabor Mate, one of the world's leading experts on trauma, explains that human beings are not born with the ability to regulate themselves emotionally on their own. We learn this through relationships with our primary caregivers. When a girl grows up without this emotional regulation from a present father, she literally does not develop the necessary psychological tools to deal with abandonment, rejection, and healthy love. It's like trying to build a house without the right tool. You can do something, but the structure will always have cracks. And these cracks appear in very specific ways. One of the most common is what psychology calls the constant search for male validation. Think about it. If the first man who should have said "you're amazing just the way you are" simply didn't, the girl will spend the rest of her life seeking that confirmation from other men. She will need every guy who comes into her life to prove that she has value. And therein lies a gigantic danger, because this need for external validation becomes a bottomless pit. No matter how many compliments she receives, how many guys show interest, that initial void is never completely filled. This search for validation manifests itself in various ways in adult behavior. There's the woman who can't be alone for even 5 minutes, who jumps from relationship to relationship because loneliness is simply unbearable. There's the one who subjects herself to humiliating situations, accepting crumbs of affection from men who clearly don't deserve even 5 minutes of her time. And there's the one who develops a compulsion for male attention, always needing to be desired, always needing to be the center of attention, because it's only in those moments that she feels she exists, But there's another side to the coin that is equally painful, and perhaps even more complex. Some women who grew up without a father develop what we might call emotional armor. It's as if their psyche says, if the first man who should have loved me didn't stay, then no other will have the chance to hurt me. These women build such high walls around their hearts that no one can truly get in. They may even have relationships, but they always maintain an emotional distance. Always have one foot out the door. Always find a way to sabotage things before they get too serious. I met a client once. I'll call her Morena to preserve her privacy, who was the personification of this. A beautiful woman, a brilliant career as an architect, financially independent, but who systematically destroyed every relationship that started to get deep. She herself didn't understand why. Every interesting guy who came along, when he started to show real feelings, she found some flaw in him. Either he was too clingy, or he wasn't ambitious enough, or he was too jealous. There was always something. When we delved deeper into therapy, we discovered that her father had abandoned the family when she was 6 years old, promising to return and never showing up again. Her brain had learned a very clear lesson. Men leave, so it's better to leave first. She was replicating the abandonment, only now she was in control of the situation. And there's another manifestation that goes completely unnoticed by most people, but is extremely common: the choice of emotionally unavailable partners. It seems crazy, right? Why would someone who suffered from the absence of their father consciously choose men who are also absent? But the human psyche doesn't work logically. It works in a familiar way. What is familiar seems safe, even if it is painful. A woman who grew up trying to win the love of a distant father will unconsciously seek men who recreate that same scenario. She is attracted to emotionally unavailable guys, to guys who need to be won over, to guys who keep their distance, because that's what her brain knows as love. This explains why so many incredible women get stuck in relationships with married men, with workaholics, with narcissistic types who will never truly be available. It's not stupidity. It's not a lack of self-love in the traditional sense. It's the brain trying to rewrite an old story, trying to finally win the love of that first man who wasn't available. It's as if the psyche is saying, if I can make this guy love me, it will be like I finally won over my father. But, of course, this never works, because you can't heal an old wound with a new person. Now, let's talk about an aspect that few people discuss, but which is absolutely central: the relationship with one's own femininity. The father is the one who first validates his daughter's femininity. He is the one who says, through gestures, words, and presence, that she is beautiful, that she is special, that she is worthy of being loved for who she is. When this doesn't happen, many women grow up with a completely confused relationship with their own femininity. Some completely reject this side, adopting a super masculinized posture as a form of protection. Others hypersexualize their own image because they have learned that the only way to get male attention is through their body and seduction. Think of those girls who, from a very young age, start dressing in an extremely provocative way, not for genuine self-expression, but clearly seeking male attention. Or those women who turn seduction into a kind of sport, constantly needing to prove that they are desirable. Often, behind this behavior is a girl who never heard from her father that she was beautiful in a dress, that he was proud to walk hand in hand with her, that she didn't need to do anything to be special. So she grows up thinking that she needs to use her body as a bargaining chip to get the affection that should have been given freely. And there's also the issue of self-esteem, which goes far beyond what we normally understand by this term. It's not just about thinking you're beautiful or confident. We're talking about something deeper. The feeling that you deserve to occupy space in the world, that your voice matters, that your needs are legitimate. The father is the one who teaches this to his daughter through the way he responds to her needs as a child. If every time she cried, he was there. If every time she needed him, he appeared. If every time she spoke, he listened. She learns that her needs matter, that she matters. But when the father is not present, when he doesn't respond, when he doesn't show up, the internalized message is completely different. My needs are not important. I am not important. Maybe I shouldn't even be here. And this core belief, formed in childhood, will contaminate absolutely everything in adult life. It appears in the difficulty of asking for a raise at work, in the inability to set boundaries in relationships, in the tendency to always put oneself last, to think that everyone else's needs are more important than one's own. There is fascinating research by psychologist Edward Crook from the University of British Columbia that shows that girls who grow up without a father are statistically more likely to develop depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem in adulthood. And it's not just correlation. There is a direct causal link. The father's presence acts as a kind of protective shield against various psychological problems. When this shield is absent, the child becomes much more vulnerable. And here we need to talk about something that is extremely important, but that generates a lot of resistance. The difference between understanding and justifying. Understanding all this psychological dynamic does not mean that the woman is a victim forever, that she has no responsibility for her own life, or that she can use the absence of the father as an excuse for everything. Quite the contrary. Understanding is the first step to change, but the change itself requires courage, hard work, and a willingness to break patterns that have been ingrained for decades. Because the truth is that no one is going to save anyone. There won't be a magician who will heal all the wounds. There won't be a cathartic event that will solve everything at once. There won't be a miracle pill. The work is internal, deep, and often painful. It requires looking at these old wounds without looking away, understanding where the destructive patterns come from, and making different conscious choices even when the whole body is screaming to follow the known path. And do you know what the cruelest part of all this is? These women usually have no idea that they are dealing with this type of wound. They think the problem is bad luck with men, or that all guys are the same, or that they simply weren't born for relationships. They never connect the dots between that absent father in childhood and the repetitive patterns that appear now. And until that connection is made, it's impossible to change anything, because you can't heal a wound you don't know you have. Here's something that very few people talk about: the impact on career choice and the relationship with authority. The father figure, archetypally, represents authority, structure, the outside world. Women who grew up without this reference often have enormous problems with authority figures. They either rebel against any kind of hierarchy, even when it sabotages their own careers, or they submit completely, seeking in bosses and mentors the approval they never had from their fathers. I've seen cases of extremely competent women who could never hold down a job for very long because they invariably clashed with superiors. And when you dig deeper, you realize that the issue wasn't the current boss. It was the figure of the father being projected there. Any feedback turned into personal rejection. Any hierarchy turned into unacceptable control. On the other hand, there are those who develop an unhealthy attachment to male authority figures at work, constantly seeking validation, doing everything to please, mixing professional relationships with the emotional need to have a father. And there's the whole issue of motherhood, which deserves special attention. Many women who grew up without a father carry a deep terror of repeating the pattern of choosing the wrong partner and leaving their own children without a father figure. This fear can be so paralyzing that they completely avoid motherhood, or they make hasty and poor choices, trying to guarantee that their child will have a present father. The result, ironically, is often exactly what they were trying to avoid. Others develop overprotectiveness towards their children, especially if they are girls, trying to compensate for everything they themselves did not have. But compensation stemming from deprivation never works well. The child does not need a mother who is trying to heal her own wounds through her. They need a whole mother who has already made peace with her own history. Now, the big question everyone wants to know: is there a solution? Can this be healed? And the answer is a resounding yes. But with an important caveat: there is no shortcut. The healing process necessarily involves some stages that cannot be skipped. The first is recognition, looking at one's own history and admitting, without minimizing or dramatizing, that paternal absence has left its mark. This seems simple, but many people spend decades avoiding this recognition, either because it hurts too much or because there is shame in admitting that they still suffer from something that happened in childhood. The second stage is grief, and here lies something that no one tells you. You need to mourn the father you never had. You need to feel the anger, the sadness, the disappointment, the abandonment, not to keep dwelling on it, but to process and release it. Many women jump straight to the "I've already gotten over it, I've already forgiven, everything's fine" phase. But in reality, they just pushed everything under the rug, and then the symptoms continue to appear in other forms. True grief means giving space to the pain, recognizing it as legitimate, and letting it exist until it naturally dissipates. The third stage, perhaps the most difficult, is This means learning to give yourself what your father didn't give you. It means building within yourself that voice of validation, of protection, of structure that should have come from outside. It means learning to be both the child who needs comfort and the adult who offers comfort. It sounds esoteric, but it's extremely practical. It involves noticing when you're seeking external validation and consciously stopping, breathing, and asking yourself, what do I really need right now? How can I give myself that? A concrete example. Let's say you've just been rejected by a guy you are getting to know. The automatic impulse is to quickly look for another guy to prove that you're desirable, or to delve into thoughts that there's something wrong with you. Reparenting means stopping that impulse and acting like a loving father would. It would mean saying to yourself, you're sad, and it's okay to feel that way, but your rejection doesn't diminish your worth in any way. You are amazing regardless of whether any man wants to be with you or not. And not just saying it, but truly embodying that truth. Another fundamental aspect of healing is developing healthy relationships with mature but not romantic male figures. It could be a mentor, a male therapist, a teacher, an older friend. This helps reprogram the brain about what healthy relationships with men look like, showing that it's possible to have connection, care, and male presence without it being romantic or sexual. Many women without fathers have never experienced this and don't know it's possible. And here's something crucial: therapy. It's not a fad. It's not for weak people. It's not a luxury. It's absolutely necessary to have a qualified professional guiding this process. A good therapist, especially one specializing in trauma and attachment, can do in months what would take a person years to do alone. There are specific modalities that work very well for this type of wound. EMDR therapy is excellent for processing trauma. Schema therapy helps to identify and change deep patterns. Psychoanalysis goes deep into unconscious issues. Books like The Body Keeps the Marks by Bessel van der Kolk and Attachment by Amir Levine are mandatory reading to better understand one's own psyche. But there is also a whole lot of work that can and should be done on a daily basis. Starting to notice the patterns is fundamental. When you find yourself being attracted to an emotionally unavailable guy, stop and ask yourself, is this really what I want, or is my brain trying to recreate a family dynamic? When you feel that desperate need for validation, breathe and observe. Where does this come from? What do I really need right now? When you're about to sabotage a healthy relationship, investigate. What am I afraid of? What would make me stay? It's also important to work on your relationship with your own femininity consciously. This can involve very practical things. Learning to receive compliments without discomfort. Allowing yourself to be cared for without feeling the need to reciprocate immediately. Exploring what femininity means to you without being bound by stereotypes. It can mean looking in the mirror and learning to like what you see. Not because of society's beauty standards, but because of genuine acceptance of who you are. Establishing clear boundaries is another essential aspect. Women without fathers often have very fragile boundaries because they never learned that their needs matter. Practicing saying no, practicing expressing discomfort, practicing leaving situations that don't serve you, even if it displeases someone, is daily training. At first, it will seem impossible. The body will react with anxiety, but over time, it becomes second nature. And there's the whole issue of intentionally choosing healthy people. This requires developing what we call emotional radar, learning to identify red flags right away, even when the chemical attraction is strong, learning to value consistency instead of intensity, learning that truly available men often don't come with all that drama that the brain has been conditioned to think is love. Sometimes healthy love seems boring at first because it doesn't have that emotional roller, but it's precisely this stability that allows real love to grow. Forgiveness is also part of the process, but not in the way most people think. Forgiving your father doesn't mean thinking what he did was right. It doesn't mean going back to having a relationship with him if it's toxic. It doesn't mean forgetting. Forgiving means letting go of the anger that's poisoning you. It means stopping giving him power over your current life. It means recognizing that he was also human and flawed, and that his flaws say more about him than about you. There are cases where the father was dealing with his own demons, with depression, with addictions, with the inability to cope with emotions because no one taught him either. Understanding this doesn't justify the absence, but it takes some of the weight off of thinking it was your fault, that if you were nicer, kinder, more special, he would have stayed. No, he left or was absent because of his own issues, not yours. You were just a child, and no child is responsible for making an adult stay. But you also have to understand that the father won't always acknowledge the damage he caused, won't always apologize, won't always change, and that's okay. Your healing doesn't depend on him doing something different now. Your healing depends only on you making peace with what happened and deciding not to let it define the rest of your life. Here we arrive at a crucial point. You are not your story. You are not the bad things that happened to you. You are not your father's absence. You are not the abandonment. You are not the rejection. These things are part of your history. They shaped who you are so far, but they don't determine who you can become. You have the power to take all that pain and transform it into wisdom, empathy, and strength. There are incredible women out there who grew up without a father and used that very wound as fuel to become the best version of themselves. Think of Oprah Winfrey, who not only grew up without a father, but also suffered terrible abuse in childhood. She could have let that destroy her life, but she chose to do things differently. She used the pain as motivation, went to therapy for decades, worked deeply on her own wounds, and became one of the most influential women in the world, precisely because of the empathy and understanding she developed through suffering. Or Michelle Obama, who speaks openly about her complex relationship with her father and how it propelled her to seek excellence and create a different kind of family. The question isn't whether you were hurt. You were. The question is what you're going to do with it now. Are you going to let that wound control your choices for the rest of your life? Are you going to keep looking for the love your father didn't give you in the wrong men? Will you continue to sabotage yourself because deep down you don't believe you deserve anything good? Or will you have the courage to face this pain head on, process it, heal it, and build a life that isn't defined by it? Because look, nobody said it would be easy. This healing work is probably the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life. There will be days when you'll want to give up. You'll think it's easier to continue with old patterns. You'll feel like you're not making any progress. But I guarantee you one thing. On the other side of this process, there's a version of you that is free. Free to choose men who truly deserve you. Free to feel your own worth without needing external validation. Free to occupy space in the world without apologizing. Free to truly love and be loved. And when you get there, when you look back and see the whole journey you've traveled, you'll understand that the girl who grew up without a father didn't die. She just grew up and learned to be her own safe haven. You'll understand that his absence, however painful it may have been, no longer has power over you. And you'll realize something incredible. You are stronger, wiser, and more complete than you ever imagined possible. So answer me this. Are you going to continue letting a wound from decades ago control who you are today? Or will you have the courage to do things differently? Because this knowledge you just absorbed here is worthless. If it doesn't translate into action, it's worthless. If you simply shrug and go back to the same patterns. What separates the people who transform their lives from those who remain trapped is just one thing: the decision to act, even with fear, even without guarantees, even without knowing exactly how. What are you going to do differently from now on? How are you going to start repenting yourself? What boundaries are you finally going to set? What patterns are you going to have the courage to break? And most importantly, are you ready to stop looking in others for what only you can give yourself? If this content touched you in any way, if you finally understood something about yourself that had never been clear before, subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell, because we're going to continue diving into these profound topics that everyone avoids, but that are exactly what you need to truly change your life. And leave a comment below. What was the biggest takeaway for you? This conversation is just beginning.